What if a simple piece of paper could decide who lives and who dies? In a quiet village, a wooden box is opened once every year. Everyone gathers, everyone waits, and one name is chosen. No one dares to question why. No one dares to resist. But tonight, something feels different. The air is heavier. The silence is sharper. And the slip of paper in one trembling hand will unleash a horror no one can escape. Stay with me, because once you hear the truth of the lottery, you will never look at tradition the same way again. Do not miss a single moment of this chilling story. Watch until the very end. The town square was filled with restless chatter. Children skipped stones across the dusty ground, while their parents whispered nervously. In the center stood a wooden box, old and scarred, its edges worn smooth by countless hands. The sun burned high, yet the air felt cold, heavy with unease. One by one, names were called, each person stepping forward to draw a slip of paper. The sound of rustling parchment echoed louder than it should have, as if the box itself exhaled. The protagonist, a young man named Elias, waited with trembling hands at his sides. His heart pounded, not with hope, but with dread he did not fully understand. He glanced at the faces around him, some pale, some grim, none smiling. When his name was spoken, the crowd hushed. His legs felt heavy as he moved toward the box, each step slower than the last. The wood smelled faintly of dust and something sour, like old iron. He reached inside, his fingertips brushing over folded slips, each one cold, almost damp. He pulled one free, his hand shaking as he clutched it tight. The silence deepened, broken only by the wind scraping against the square's flagpoles. Elias stared at the paper, but his eyes refused to see the mark. Instead, he felt the weight of the crowd pressing closer, breath shallow, voices caught in throats. The elder stepped forward, voice rough and low. "Show us." Elias unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. His stomach twisted, his vision blurred, as the black mark revealed itself. The crowd inhaled sharply, a sound like one single gasp. Elias's knees weakened, his skin burning hot though the air was icy. The elder's eyes glimmered, not with pity, but with finality. The murmurs grew louder, circling him, until they felt like a chant. And then, the murmurs grew louder, circling him, until they felt like a chant. And then, silence. The crowd parted as Elias's mother stepped forward, her face pale as stone. Her lips moved, but no words escaped, only a trembling breath. Children clung to their parents, eyes wide, as though they knew what came next. The elder raised a hand, and the box was carried away. Elias's slip of paper slipped from his grasp, tumbling to the dirt like a fallen leaf. It fluttered once, then lay still, the black mark glaring up at the sky. Elias tried to speak, but his throat closed, the sound swallowed before it formed. The villagers closed in, their shadows stretching long across the square. Every step toward him was slow, deliberate, as though part of a ritual older than memory. The air grew heavier, pressing against his chest, suffocating and thick. A stone was placed in someone's hand. Then another. The weight of the moment crashed upon Elias, more crushing than any stone could ever be. He staggered back, his breath ragged, the ground spinning beneath his feet. Faces he had known all his life stared at him without warmth, only duty. And from deep within the crowd, a single voice rose. It whispered his name. It whispered his name. The sound slithered through the crowd, curling around his ears, heavier than the silence that followed. Elias turned, but no mouth had moved. The whisper came again, louder this time, echoing inside his skull. The villagers tightened their circle, closing the last gap of escape. A stone slipped from a child's trembling hand, thudding softly in the dirt. Elias's stomach twisted, a sour taste rising in his throat. He stumbled backward until his shoulder struck the cold wall of the square. There was nowhere left to run. The elder's voice cut through the air, steady and final. The mark chooses. The mark binds. Torches flared as if in agreement. their flames leaning toward Elias like watchful eyes. Sweat stung his brow, sliding into his eyes, blurring the faces around him. Each villager now held a stone, the weight of tradition pressing harder than fear. The whisper inside his head grew into a roar, a chorus of voices all calling his name. Elias clutched his ears, but the sound drilled deeper, clawing at his thoughts. His breath broke, fast and shallow, his chest aching. Then the first stone lifted, its shadow stretching across his face. The crowd moved as one, their silence heavier than the blow that had yet to fall. And in that suspended moment, Elias understood. The lottery was never chance. It was sacrifice. It was sacrifice. The word carved itself into his mind, sharp as steel. Elias's eyes darted from face to face, neighbors, friends, even family, yet all of them were strangers now. Their gazes were hollow, stripped of choice, bound by something older than their own fear. A woman's hand shook as she raised her stone. A boy no older than 10 clutched his lips quivering but his eyes locked on Elias. The weight of generations pressed down on them, and not one dared to break the circle. The stones lifted higher, their shadows merging until Elias stood beneath a canopy of darkness. The chant began, soft at first, then stronger. Not words he knew, but sounds that vibrated through his chest, rattling his bones. The ground itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm, as though the earth demanded blood. Elias pressed his back harder against the wall, his nails clawing at the rough stone. His throat burned with a scream that refused to rise. The first stone flew. It struck his shoulder, dull and heavy, forcing the air from his lungs. Pain shot down his arm, but worse than the pain was the realization. No one looked away, not even his mother. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something colder, acceptance. Another stone struck his ribs, sharp and jarring. The crowd closed tighter, the circle now unbreakable. Each hand rose, each hand obeyed. The chant thundered louder, vibrating through the night air until Elias felt it in his bones. Stone after stone rained down, their impacts dull, relentless, echoing against flesh and stone alike. Elias gasped, staggering to his knees, blood warm against the cold ground. The voices inside his head screamed in unison, louder than his own pain, drowning him in their command. The mark chooses. The mark binds. His vision blurred, the faces around him twisting into masks of shadow. He raised a trembling hand toward the crowd, reaching for mercy. None came. A final stone, heavier than the rest, crashed against his temple. The world tilted, spinning into blackness. And as he fell, the chant ceased. The silence was sudden, suffocating, absolute. The villagers dropped their stones one by one, as if shedding guilt they had never carried. The elder bent to retrieve the slip of paper, now stained and torn. He placed it back inside the wooden box, sealing it with care. And the box waited, patient, for another year. The box waited, patient, for another year. Dawn crept across the square, spilling pale light over the cobblestones. The villagers dispersed in silence, their footsteps hollow, their faces unreadable. Children clung to their parents, not from fear, but from habit, as though nothing unusual had passed. The elder lingered, his hand resting on the wooden box, eyes closed in grim devotion. By morning, the square looked unchanged. Only a faint smear of red in the dirt remained, soon hidden beneath the scuff of shoes and the drift of dust. The baker opened his shop. The blacksmith stoked his forge. Life continued, seamless, as though sacrifice was as natural as sunrise. In the empty house at the edge of town, Elias's chair sat pushed back from the table. His cup remained half full, milk gone sour overnight. His mother placed a cloth over it, her hands steady, her face expressionless. No one spoke his name again, but in the silence of the night, when the wind pushed through the square, the sound of stones striking echoed faintly. A reminder, a promise. And high above, the box waited still. Years passed. Children grew into adults. New faces arrived, old ones faded, but the ritual remained. The box was never questioned, never opened except for its purpose. Whispers spread among the young, quiet doubts spoken under moonlight. But by daylight, those doubts dissolved into silence, swallowed by the weight of tradition. The stones never left the square. They rested at the edges, worn smooth by time and by blood, waiting to be lifted once more. One year, a boy named Samuel asked his father, "Why must we draw the slips?" His father's hand trembled as he answered, "Because without it, the fields will wither, the river will dry, and we will all suffer." Samuel said no more. When summer came, he stood in the square with the rest, his eyes wide, his hands clenched. The slips fluttered in the elders' hands again, fragile and final. The villagers held their breath, the silence alive with dread. And once again, a mark appeared. A chosen name. A scream broke the air. The stones rose. The chant began. And the cycle turned, unbroken, inevitable, eternal. Years melted into decades. Generations came and went, their names forgotten, their voices lost to the chant. But the box remained, always at the center of the square, always waiting. No one alive remembered who built it or why the lottery began. They only remembered the rule. The ritual must never be broken. And so the stones kept falling. The cries kept echoing. The earth drank what was given, and the crops grew tall. The town survived, but at a price no one dared to question. As the sun set over the square once more, the elder closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "The lottery is not a choice. It is the truth." And with that, silence fell. The cycle was complete. Until next year.